Well, this time every week we are taking a look at a different division in Major League Baseball as the ramp up to the new season continues. And this week with Garion, Thorne, and Steve Buchanan, I'm Adam Kaufman. It's time for the AL West, boys. And last year, you had, of course, the Oakland Athletics winning that division. It was kind of a quiet, pedestrian offseason for the A's. You know, they obviously acquire shortstop Elvis Andrus from the Rangers, but maybe more notably, you have Matt Chapman coming back from that hip injury. So as you look at it right now, Garion, who is the fantasy MVP for this club?
I think it has to be Chapman. I mean, you look at him and Matt Olson. Those are kind of the two mainstay bats in the middle of that lineup. And I know it's kind of strange to say this after Matt Chapman had like a 36% strikeout rate last year, but the volatility of Matt Olson's profile does scare me a little bit. He's someone who could definitely have 40 home runs this season, but as we saw last year, he can hit 197. Like, he's a little bit more like Joey Gallo that I think people are kind of wanting to realize. So I think someone like Chapman is where you can say maybe the 2020 statistics we don't take too seriously. Like, you look at his track record from 2018 and 2019, over 1,200 plate appearances, his strikeout rate was basically 23%. So I'm willing to go with the larger sample here from when he was healthy, from when we had a full normal season, and say that's really the more of the Matt Chapman we're going to get. But you look elsewhere, like Luzardo's a really interesting guy, but does he throw more than 160 innings this season? Like, there's so many questions with everybody else. I just think Chapman's kind of like the safe fantasy MVP of this team.
Definitely fair to remember that last year's season was only a third of the length of a normal season. But Bukes, as you look at it, is there a better option?
So it's hard for Chapman to be the MVP because the A's are going to ship him out in the middle of the year because they're ready for a rebuild. If this team starts off slow, the Oakland A's are going to be shipping people out of here because they have some serious budget issues coming up over the next couple of years. So I like Chapman, but I think Chapman's not going to be on this team by the end of the year. Gary already brought it up. I'm on Jesus Luzardo. I mean, this is somebody who quickly ascended through the minors. We've seen him pitch 71 innings over the past 2 seasons, just under a 26% K percentage, limits the walk, 6.8 walk percentage over the past 2 seasons. He limits hard contact. Really, really nasty slider that he has in his arsenal too as well. I think they're going to get, kind of lift the chains off of him a little bit this year, see what they have in him, because they are going towards a youth movement. If it's not this year, it's going to be in the next couple of years. He's going to be an anchor of that rotation. So I have Luzardo down for me.
So Buke, staying with you, DK Sportsbook has the A's as the favorite to win that division, plus 125. You like them to repeat over the course of a full normal season?
I'm not crazy about this team. I'm really not crazy about this team. So at plus 125, I don't know. I mean, there's no one really in the AL West that I like to win. I mean, somebody has to win, but I'm not crazy about this team. So I'm definitely not on them at plus 125. It's, pretty decent odds, I guess. But, the Astros are still in the division. Maybe the Angels start making some noise this year, but I'm just not crazy about the Athletics this year.
Garen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be, too seduced by star power alone because we know Oakland has kind of had this ability to come together as a 25 or now a 26-man roster and be the better team. But, like Buke said, they constantly have budgetary issues. You never really know when they're going to start selling off pieces. And, maybe you take the projection systems with a bit of a grain of salt, but like Pacoda hates the Athletics. It's not even close. Like, they have Houston to win 93 games and Oakland to be a sub 500 team. And I kind of get it when you look at the way those projection systems at least gather their data. I mean, they're looking at who supplied wins to Oakland last season. And if you look at FWAR, they lost 3 of their top 8 players in Marcus Semien, who didn't even really have a good season last year. Robbie Grossman was strangely important. I mean, people forget he's like a good solid defensive outfielder and a really good OBP guy. And then obviously Liam Hendricks, who might have been their most important player, especially considering some of the length issues they have with their rotation. So I look at Houston at plus 160. They've got a much better lineup, especially if Jordan Alvarez comes back healthy. They've got 2 of the best pitchers in the division in McCullers and Greinke. Like, I just think that's amazing value in Houston right now.
Let's talk about those Astros then. We'll stay with you here, Garion, because obviously George Springer is gone. In fact, goes to your favorite team, the Blue Jays. But then beyond that, you have Altuve still there and Correa's still there. Bregman's still there. Obviously, it's a good rotation, especially when healthy. So, 1, I mean, should we be giving this Astros team more respect than we are? And 2, who's the difference maker fantasy-wise?
I think we should. And I think one player in particular, it's funny. I know he had a really bad second half of a season that was already a third long. So, take those stats with a grain of salt. But he had a bad playoff run too. And that's when everyone was kind of watching. But I checked Alex Bregman's ADP this morning, and he's going like towards the back end of the third round in a 15-team league. Wow. I remember getting him towards the back end of the second round last year and thinking that was an absolute steal. And I know he had a lot of the like cheating scandal baggage on his shoulders at that point, and having a bad season doesn't exactly, it kind of validates everyone's frustration from last season. But, Derek Carty's projection system, the BAT, it projects Bregman to be the 7th best hitter in baseball by WOBA. Like, that's not crazy either, because we've seen it time and time again. So I just think the value you can get right now on someone like Alex Bregman, I know it's the obvious choice, but I just think he's the best hitter on this team, and he has the potential to be a top 5 hitter in baseball. So as a third round pick, that's crazy.
Obvious to Garion. What about you, Bukes?
So you'll lose George Springer. Big loss. It's a big loss. If only they had somebody who only played 2 games last year that can come back and provide some pop. Oh, that's right, they do. His name is Yordan Alvarez. I mean, a huge power bat that they're getting back this season. This is someone who, when healthy, has 30-plus home run potential when he is healthy. In 2019, just over a half season, don't forget about this, 27 home runs, 78 RBIs, and an isolated power of 342. Now, do I expect him to replicate that in 2021? Probably not. But you see the potential that they have with him. So while they're losing George Springer, and that's not a loss that you need to discount, Alvarez is easily going to step in, provide a massive power boost to this Astros lineup that, quite frankly, needs it, because they have no depth on that bench. And, while most teams have struggles in the bottom half of their lineup, their bottom half of the lineup is brutal. So they need Alvarez more than ever to produce. He's healthy coming into the year. Hopefully he can stay that way.
Bukes Garion here expects a bounce back for Alex Bregman. The DK Sportsbook certainly respects the man as well. Plus 1,000 odds to win AL MVP. Only guy with better odds is Mike Trout, who, as we know, is a perennial candidate to win Most Valuable Player. Would you lay some money there on Bregman to win this award?
So reportedly, him and I have the same off-season regimen. He put on 27 pounds of muscle, as did I. So, we're definitely on the same path. But here's where I start to get a little, because last year on pace, if we played a full season of games, he was only on pace for 23 home runs, which is a far cry from the prior 2 seasons when he hit 41 and 31. Now, obviously, his off-season routine, he recognized that and is trying to rectify that. But I need to see it first before I take him with the second best odds on the board at MVP. You can find so much better value with some other players on the board. So, could Bregman do it? Absolutely. You're getting much better odds than someone like Mike Trout. No doubt about that. But for someone who's coming off a really bad season, this is not exactly a buy low spot with how the odds are set right now. So don't like the odds at all. Would be staying far away from that. You're just not getting enough for the season that Bregman is coming off of.
Gary, and you think Bukes put on that Saquon Barkley muscle, real quad heavy, since we can't see it?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's all lower half muscle, which is that's the best kind of muscle. I think he made a perfect point in the latter half of his answer, which is just, you're not getting any value. You're not getting any discount in the odds for how bad Bregman was last season. And I think it's not going out on a limb to say this guy will be better in a normal season, but we should get a little bit more juice here. And the fact that we're not, it does kind of dissuade me from making this bet, even though he fills the exact archetype of the type of player you want to bet for this award, because you need someone who impacts the game, not just with his bat, but also defensively. We know Bregman can be one of the more talented third basemen in all of baseball, but when you're looking down this list, and we know it's a very narrative driven award as well. I mean, I look at someone like Luis Robert, who I know Steve's going to love this, but 25-1 to win AL MVP. This is someone who last season was 99th percentile in outs above average. He has a case to be the best defensive center fielder in baseball, maybe the most impactful position defensively on a baseball diamond. And he could be a 30-30 guy in a year where the White Sox maybe win the AL Central. Like, maybe the counter argument to that would be, are they really going to give a White Sox the AL MVP 2 years in a row? I don't know. But if you go 30-30 and are the best defensive player in baseball, there's a pretty good case to be made. So I think there's odds I like more farther down the board.
The reigning American League Rookie of the Year is Kyle Lewis from Seattle. As we move on to the Mariners, when it comes to a fantasy outlook, there's not a lot there for the M's. It kind of starts and ends with Lewis as far as potential studs. You tell me, Gary, and is there anyone we're sleeping on here?
Yeah, Mitch Hanniger, classic buy low candidate. This is someone who has dealt with a myriad of injuries the last couple seasons, really unlucky, just hasn't been able to get on the diamond. But you go back to the start of 2017, which that's the exact moment he began his career in Seattle. He's got a 128 WRC plus over that span of time. That's better than Manny Machado. It's better than Nolan Arenado. This guy can hit. He really can. And yes, there's obvious concerns about how much he can be on a diamond. But when you're getting someone right now at pick 275 in NFBC formats, you're taking the risk. It's a lottery ticket at that point. Maybe he only does have 60 plate appearances this season. All right, drop him because he's the fifth outfielder on your team. You don't care. So he's just someone with so much upside and potential that, where he's going in drafts, it's a steal.
Bukes, who's screaming upside to you?
Yeah, Jared Kellnick. You probably don't know about him yet. But believe me, by the time the All-Star breaks rolls around, you're going to know who this kid is. He's probably not going to be with the team right away. He's likely going to get the call up in mid-April because teams like to screw with service time. So they're going to do that with him. But he was the centerpiece of that deal that sent Robinson Cano and Edwin Diaz to the Mets. Mets fans are happy right now. They're not going to be happy when he starts playing. He boasted all power and speed. This Mariners team, I don't want to do a hot take as of yet. This is my dark horse in the AL West. They have a ton of potential, which leads us to our next question.
All right, well, let's go there. A team with potential and a whole lot of unknowns, I suppose, and that is the Angels, who just are, this is a team, while you got perennial MVP candidate Mike Trout, you also have a perennial disappointment in terms of, these Angels every single year. You look at the offense, the questions really mostly exist on the pitching front, but the offense, you have Trout, you have Ohtani, you have, Rendon, you have Pujols, who it's looking like it's his final season. That's what his wife says anyway, and I'm inclined to trust her. So what are the odds that Bukes, this team actually does make a little bit of noise in that division?
I'm not crazy about it. They do have some potential. They have a lot of big names there. And in looking from a betting perspective, the A's minus 130 to make the playoffs, not crazy about that. Astros minus 112. That's probably the better bet there, but they just have a lot of things to work up. Not crazy about that bullpen. That's going to be a big problem for them there. That rotation has a lot of question marks in there too as well. If everything aligns, they no doubt have the talent. So I have no problem with that. They just haven't got it right for year after year after year. Not crazy about that. The outfield mix, either signing Dexter Fowler, that's kind of going in the reverse direction than going forward. So it's a team that has some potential. I'll give them that, but I'm certainly not looking to lay money down on this team.
Any fantasy relevant pitchers here, Garion?
Bundy is like a top 100 pick this season. He was really good last year. High strikeout rate, really good FIP. So I can definitely understand people taking a look at him seriously with where he's going in drafts right now. The issue you have with their rotation is just, generally with these types of teams that have great offensive potential and a couple question marks in the back end of the rotation, you sign guys like Alex Cobb and Jose Quintana and et cetera, and you hope that maybe one can pan out. If the Angels are going to make the playoffs at plus 160, they almost need every single one of their flyer pitching acquisitions to pan out. And then they need last season's flyer pitching acquisition, Dylan Bundy, to continue pitching like he did in that shortened season against, I would say, questionable competition. I believe in Bundy, but for being honest, he faced the Rangers 3 times, Oakland 3 times, not exactly the cream of the crop when it came to his pitching opponents last season. So I just think the American League is strangely deep this season. The AL East, depending how you feel about the Red Sox, could be 4 good teams. The AL Central is 3 good teams, depending on whether or not Cleveland can kind of survive their salary purge. And then, we've already talked about, Steve kind of likes the Mariners to maybe be a dark horse. We've got Oakland maybe falling off a bit, but they're going to be competitive. Houston's going to be good. There's just not that many playoff spots, and there's a lot of good teams. And I just don't have a lot of faith in the Angels.
All right. Well, I feel like you've kind of answered the question, but at plus 160 odds, it's one thing to say all the things that need to go right for the Angels to snap a skid of 6 straight years without the playoffs. But do you believe it'll happen? Does any part of you want to make that bet?
No, and I think the thing that I look at most is you talk about last season. Not only did we have more than half of the American League make the playoffs, and they didn't, but we also had two really good seasons from their key offensive players. Mike Trout will tell you that he had a subpar season, which I guess by his own standards he did, but he was still a top 10 offensive player in baseball. And Anthony Rendon was amazing last season. No one talked about it because the Angels were so bad, but you already had like 95th percentile results from your two best offensive players, and you couldn't make the playoffs in a year where everyone made the playoffs. So I don't know why I'm supposed to think they'll get better this season. I know they were heating up. They had a really bad start, and then they kind of heated up and ran out of time, but I don't have faith in the Angels.
Bukes, you're only allowed one dark horse per division, so I have to assume you don't like the Angels either.
No, not really. Because I mean, let's just say that the Astros win the division. So that means the Angels' path to victory is the wild card. That's not going to happen. I mean, teams like the Blue Jays are in contention now for the wild card potentially. The Twins will be right there in contention for the wild card. Are they better than those teams? I don't think so. Because like Garion said, everything has to work for this Angels team to sneak in. Whereas the Blue Jays, the Twins, they can kind of get away with some guys being average because they can pick it up in other areas. So I think their only path to victory to get to the playoffs is in the wild card. And with how this American League is set up, that ain't going to happen.
Rangers Bukes openly rebuilding. You got Joey Gallo, and that's it, right? When it comes to a fantasy perspective, is there anybody else worth keeping an eye on?
Yeah, Nate Lowe, someone to maybe keep an eye on here. Has some decent pop, career 196 isolated power and 245 plate appearances with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's got to beat out Ronald Guzman, though, for the first base spot. They could end up platooning there, but this is just a really, really bad Rangers team that looks like they're years away from being in any serious competition. But I think Nate Lowe is someone that you can watch for at first base.
Anybody excite you, Garion?
Yeah, I think offensively, just because it's a good ballpark, especially in the summer when it gets really, really humid out in Texas. But, kind of see who trickles to the top of that lineup, who's hitting around Gallo a couple weeks into the season, and maybe you jump on them because they're probably going to be available in the waiver wire, if we're being completely honest. Dunning is kind of an interesting guy in their rotation. I think he's going to make it just because they don't have anyone else. The nice thing about a team that's openly rebuilding is, we talked about like Jared Kellnick earlier. You sort of have to wait on him to actually get to the majors, where with Dunning, I think he's just going to be there. He's already 26. So like the prospect years, quote unquote, are sort of behind him. This is his time to come to the majors and actually pitch. And he started 7 games last season, had a strikeout per 9 above 9, had a swinging strike rate of about 11.5%. So the potential for strikeouts is there. I think he could be kind of an interesting guy, especially considering he's going around pick 300 right now.
All right, so in this strikeout or homer sport, you can't ignore that Joey Gallo does have plus 1,100 odds in the DK Sportsbook to lead the American League in home runs. Guys that, have better odds, in fact, in the majors for that matter, Mike Trout and Pete Alonso, and that is it. So, Garion, do you at least, feel good about the long ball here?
I mean, you have to. I'm not saying these are great odds because, again, we're kind of cherry picking from the top of the board here. But if you talk about a guy who was created in a lab to hit home runs, it's Joey Gallo. Among active qualified players, he has the lowest ground ball to fly ball ratio in baseball, and he has the second highest home run to fly ball ratio in baseball. So he only hits fly balls, and 28% of the time those fly balls leave the park. He's always a candidate to hit 50 home runs if he can stay healthy. So these are reasonable odds. I tend to like deeper odds in these like hits and home runs and all these kind of props, but it's fair. I'll definitely say that.
Bukes, would you put money on him?
Nah, it stinks. I think these odds stink. I mean, look, last year he only missed 3 games. He played 57 games last year. He was on pace for 28 home runs. Like, I'm not comfortable. I mean, I get it. Like Garion said, he's a home run, building machine. This is the guy that's going to hit home runs. But you look at someone like Jose Abreu, who's 30-1 in this category. Last year, he was on pace for 52 home runs. He's been over 30 home runs in 4 of his 6 years in the majors. I would much, much rather put the amount that I would put on Gallo and put it on Jose Abreu at 30-1 for somebody who is consistently hitting over 20 home runs, even in that shortened season. He was 1 away from hitting 20 home runs for every single year in his career in the major leagues. I'd put the money on that. That's the guy you want to target.
All right, for Garion, Thorne, Steve Buchanan, a man who was created in a lab to spit hot fire. I'm Adam Kaufman. The division previews continue on each and every week as we ramp up to the start of the new year.